Welcome. This is the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and general explorer of the service and experience space. On the podcast, I seek out and interview entrepreneurs, leading business people, authors, tech leaders, academics, and generally cool people doing interesting stuff in the service and experience space. Check out the archive at adrianswinscoe.com. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. Before we get into the interview, I'd like to give a big shout out and thanks to all of the folks at Calendly for sponsoring the podcast this month. Calendly makes scheduling meetings easy and efficient, eliminating the hassle of back and forth emails so you can get back to work. It's used by everyone from small businesses to Fortune 100 companies, and millions of people around the world rely on Calendly to close deals, build better relationships with their customers, drive customer success, and grow their businesses faster. So do check them out by following the links in the show notes. Now, let's get back into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Elaine Richards, who is the Chief Operating Officer at 37signals, who are the makers of Basecamp and Hey. So building on that, hey, Elaine, how are you?
Hey,
and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Elaine, for the benefit of our listeners and the people that read the highlights that we produce on the back of the podcast, can you tell us a little bit about kind of you and the work that you do, and also give us a thumbnail sketch on Basecamp and Hey and all that type of good stuff?
Yeah, certainly. So as you mentioned in your very nice intro, I'm the COO of 37signals. That's the name of the company. We are better known by the software we make. So we make a very popular project management software called Basecamp, and also a popular email platform called Hey. And in my role, I oversee a few different things. So I'm in charge of our administrative and back office functions. I lead our marketing group, and probably most interesting to your listeners, all of our customer operations. So we have a customer support team that you could think of as like a lot of the technical and functional support. How does this thing work? I can't log in, that kind of stuff. And then our customer success team, which is really about making it work for our customers.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Now, I know about Basecamp. I mean, I've used it on and off over the course of the years, but I'm also I know of kind of Basecamp and how much it's liked and loved by the people that kind of use it, and it's a much well respected, and much talked about kind of company. But the reason I wanted to have you on the podcast is because there's a lot of talk in the service and experience circles, but much of it is dominated by big brands, big orgs, big technology, so on and so forth. But you consciously serve and focus on customers in the small to mid-market sort of like space. And I was like, brilliant. That's like kind of mostly everybody when you exclude really big brands. And it's like we don't spend enough time thinking of getting outside the bubble and actually kind of thinking about what's going on the ground for many smaller and mid-sized kind of companies. So the thing I wanted to ask you about was like, can you tell me a little about those companies that you're customers, because that you're kind of working closely with, and what they're thinking about, and what's top of mind for them when it comes to, all this palaver that we call service and experience?
Yeah. No, it's really interesting, and it kind of cuts both ways, this big and small company thing, right? I would kind of argue that the bigger a company gets, the more you're trying to do a volume scale play, and then generally speaking, the worse your customer service gets. And then from the customer side, the customers we serve, it's a different mentality. They are small businesses. They are not blessed with an overabundance of resources and people, right? And they didn't get into the business to do, usually the administrative or other things that go around with it. Certainly they want to build a high quality product, and they want to help their customers and deliver the right things. But, there's a lot that goes into running a business. Mm-hmm. And what I hear consistently and see consistently among them is, they got into it because they love a thing. They love to make a thing. They love to do a thing. They love to help a certain set of people. And then there's all this other stuff that comes with running a business. And I think that is the thing that we try to keep in mind is no small business manager owner, woke up in the morning and said, what I really want to do today is shop for productivity software. Like, I think that would be really great. That's how I'm really going to mark my day, right? They wake up in the morning, they go, oh, yeah, there's still that problem that I was looking at yesterday. We can't find the document. We don't have a record of the customer's thing. We don't know where the project is, any number of sort of organizational things. And, it's part of doing work day to day, but it's not what they got in it for. And so I think what we try to keep in mind is how do we provide tools and solutions that really answer the call from a technical and functional perspective, but as a customer support team, how do we really go into it with the mindset of you showed up not because you want software, but because you want to have a problem, and how can we help you address that problem?
That's really interesting because it reminds me of this kind of thing that many people talk about in sort of service and experience. And I know people are talking about building relationships and building an emotional connection and all these different things, but they sort of forget in many ways. It's almost like they want to get there because that's like the nice to have stuff, right? But the bottom line is, and there's a kind of a theory sort of piece of thinking around this, is like going, customers have jobs to be done. That sort of JBTD sort of thing.
Yes. Yes.
You're like, they're on, some people talk about missions, some people talk about jobs, some people talk about tasks, but it's like, bottom line, customer comes to you or uses you or visits you or whatever because they want to do a thing, want to achieve a thing, want to find out a thing. And what you're saying,
I couldn't agree more. Yes.
Help them do the thing.
Yes, we 100% align with that philosophy and that framework. We've done a lot of work along those lines. I think about, and we have a really incredibly wide range of businesses that we serve. So we serve a lot of marketing agencies, a lot of technology type firms, and then a huge long tail of literally every kind of business and organization you've ever seen. And so, some of them like Aptus Design Works is a customer of ours. They've been with us for, I think, over a decade now. They do design and engineering, product design and engineering work, right? And their job to be done is, hey, we have many, many clients over the course of the decade who come to us with a project. We help them with a thing. We like to be able to keep the records of the thing in one spot. So when they come back and they say, hey, we're ready to iterate on this product, can you, pull up the old designs and go from there, as well as sort of get things through the chain that are currently in the works. Mm-hmm. And again, right. So to your point, that's their job to be done. I'm sure they're also, like to have pleasant everyday conversations with people. Who doesn't? But that's not their job to be done, right? So I can be as pleasant as I want on the phone. I'm sure that's helpful, but that's not the job.
Yeah, and if I'm not cutting it, delivering on the deadline and getting all the things in order to do it, it's like going all sorts of pleasantries.
Yeah,
it's like wallpaper.
Not helpful.
And so that's fascinating because actually kind of what it makes me think about also, can you talk about this kind of like, small companies and the reason why people get into it, and then you get big companies. And it's funny, it's almost a bit like there's like this circle that they almost like meet each other. It's like small companies are trying to do things efficiently. Like they think kind of, this is how big companies can do things, therefore we should act like this. And then funnily enough, large companies are going, we need to act a bit more like them and be a bit more agile and stuff. Yet it's very often they don't talk to each other, which I find really quite strange.
That's a really, really interesting insight. I agree. I think large companies are always trying to figure out how can we be more nimble, more agile, quicker, like a smaller company. And I think the small company ends up in the spotlight. Well, maybe if we had this CRM that's such and such, I don't want to name names, right? But, CRM that XYZ, every really large enterprise company uses, it'd be great. And I think what they find is like, yeah, it's great. I mean, you're going to have to employ 5 people just to run that CRM, but sure, go for it.
Yeah.
And overbuilt software, I think, is something that we feel really strongly negatively against, right? The solution needn't be complex. It just needs to be effective.
Yeah, well, tell that to many of the major software kind of makers, particularly the ones that are popular on our desktops, where we probably and have
Yep,
only done for the last kind of like, what, 30, 40 years, only ever used
that's
about
right.
20, 25% of any of its functionality.
That's right. That's right.
Go figure.
Yep.
But so the other thing I wanted to do is I also wanted to kind of pick up on it because this is really important, I think, because we're in this sort of time that, there's a debate around, are we going into a recession? Are we in it already? Are we coming out of it? Are we going to go into it again? Coming and going. Economic uncertainty it's all over the place. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, I
Yeah.
think. Now, the only thing we know for certain that economic conditions are tightening. Interest rates are
Mhm.
going up, inflation's going up, cost of inputs and all these different things are getting affected, et cetera, et cetera. Demand is softening. And it's sort of meaning that many firms are focusing more and more on retention and loyalty. And you spoke to the
Mhm.
idea about customer success, particularly that's important if you're in that software sort of like space. So what are you doing? What are you doing to make your customers successful and then help retain them that we can maybe learn from, as it were?
Yeah. I mean, I just have to say, like, overarchingly, I think the thing that helps us do this is the fact that we are a small company and a small business ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we fundamentally, and you'll hear Jason and David talk a lot about this on podcasts and in blog posts, right? We know where our customers come from. We understand what it means to have a small team. We understand what it means to have to make really difficult choices about where you put your resources. And so I think that influences both the features that we choose and don't choose, quite frankly, because any software company would tell you there's an unlimited number of requests and things that you can do. And I think that's often how a lot of places end up in sort of a technology bloat kind of situation. So I think that really informs, as I said, equally what we do and what we don't do. And I think it informs how we think about success. It informs how we think about pricing. So recently we moved to a per seat pricing model, which we had not had, I think, ever before. And a lot of that was with the very small customer in mind, right? Which is, if it's just you and a small handful of people, how can we help you out? How can we pay tribute to how difficult that is? And and really focus on sort of betting with you, um, and offering you a solution that can do all the things that several things can do on a per seat basis for one price. Um, I saw a post recently, actually on LinkedIn, of someone who had just switched over from a multiple software solution to just Basecamp, was kind of marveling at not just the price savings, but also sort of the efficiency that he had gotten from it. All in one, just happened over the weekend. And I think that's what we're looking for, right? Is, again, how do we help you simplify? If there really is going to be a recession, by all signs there is, then we've all got to figure that out, how to simplify,
Mm-hmm.
how to be more efficient.
But I also know that your whole customer success sort of, if you like, I mean, this is not the customer success initiative. It's always been in your heart, but I think it's this kind of recently named thing,
Yes.
as it were.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and it's not like you have a massive team of people with all sorts of CSMs, kind of like scheduling meetings and doing onboarding and kind of software that's going, ping, these people are doing this, these people are doing that, and it's all super technical and scientific. Sort of not like that. But I know it's built out different kind of elements. A lot of it's behaviors and pricing and thinking about kind of people. But they also know that that the community that you've built is a big part of that. Actually, help people help themselves and help each other, sort of thing. Which I thought brilliant, because people have been talking about community for a long time, and some people are going to go, "Oh, build it," and they will come,
Mm-hmm.
and then they don't,
Mm-hmm.
and then you end up all these stale sandwiches.
Yeah.
And but you've built this community which is thriving by my
Yeah.
understanding. And so I wanted to kind of ask you about that. Tell me about that and how that came about and what you're learning from it and how that's helping the whole drive the
Sure.
success of it.
Sure. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, we've always held customer success as a philosophical thing that we believe in. I think we've started to do more actual codified things in the last year or so. So we do have a specific customer success team now that particularly works with new customers and says, how can we help this make it work for you? There's nothing more intimidating than, I'll be perfectly honest, right? Than looking at a new piece of software for the very first time and it's like staring at a blank page. Like, great, there's tons of opportunity. Where do I start?
Mm-hmm.
So they really help new folks get up and running. And they do so in a way, and I am getting to your community question, I promise. They're really doing so in a very genuine, like, tell me about your business and what's your challenge and how can we set this up for you in a way that works kind of way. Very different from, I think, what you're referring to, which is you see it fairly common, right? And the title's the same. So it's a customer success person, which is largely a sales role and trying to get you converted into more services or whatever it is. And that's truly not what we're after. So anyway, at the same time as we were doing this customer success team, what we also realized was, while we think we know a fair amount, and certainly we know a lot about our product, we're not experts about every type of company and industry and so on in the world. Can't be, right? And so, but we know a lot of people who are actually, who happen to be, many of our customers, and many of them longtime customers. And we thought, well, maybe we should just get out of the way, right? And let these folks who have more in common, and some longtime Basecamp folks and some not, let's, provide a place for them to get together and for them to talk. Sure, they talk about the product and, share a lot of great tips and tricks and so on for how they make the thing work for them, which is great. But they talk about other things too, problems related to, again, just running a business or, day-to-day administrative and so on and so forth. And it is lovely to see and very organic, wonderfully organic. And we've been very fortunate. I think a lot of that comes from the company and the brand being known so well for so long, and people feel that authenticity and love to be a part of it. And a lot of it, I don't know, maybe it's a testimony to the goodness of people, Adrian. I don't know.
I think it's, but I'm interested in like, you built it, you set it up, sort of thing. But it's like, did you just let people know about it, and then, or did you kind of like encourage them and incentivize them to be part of it? How did that kind of work? Because I think that's sometimes the trick, right? It's like, it's a bit like organizing a party,
Sure.
and everybody shows up, and you
That's
go,
right.
is it like, how do you get things going? You go like, first round's on me, or you put on a really great record that everybody's going to dance to, or kind of whatever. How do you get things going? How do you generate that momentum? Because otherwise, everybody's like showing up, looking around, and going, "What do we do?"
Right. It can be quite awkward, and then to your point, you can end up with a lot of stale sandwiches. So we didn't know what was going to happen, and so we took a fairly conservative approach. I think we invited, I don't know, a couple of dozen, maybe a few more than that, longtime customers in the beginning. We say, hey, we're going to do this thing. Would you like to come in? They said, yeah, we'll get in there. So we started it up and we invited folks in. And I think in the beginning we were spending a lot of time trying to like seed conversation and moderate and facilitate. And don't get me wrong, we still do some of that. But I think immediately, again, it was sort of amazing. People were open to sharing, were interested in sharing, were interested in meeting each other. And so we opened it up to a few more people. And, I think over time we'll figure out how to open this up, open it up to everybody. It essentially is, we just don't promote it a ton. But, we've only had it for, I think, 6 months now. So we're kind of still getting underway. We love what we're seeing so far. The activity is just really amazing. And again, very self-driving, as it were.
And are you getting a lot of feedback from the community around the product, and has that informing kind of like sort of roadmap and
It's been
functionality?
yes, that's a great point. It's been a great place for us to sort of preview new functions. Obviously, the people who are in there are very excited to see the new things before they become official. And it's a great, sort of beta test kind of group occasionally. And yeah, it's
Awesome.
been very insightful.
No, I think it's great. I mean, it's that sort of thing is almost like, because it's a great way. I think a lot of people try and do it, but sometimes they don't do it very well. or they don't put the effort in, or they don't select the right sort of people to get things kind of going and things. And so that, yeah, I just wanted, I know it's a big part of the whole, it's becoming a bigger part of the sticky experience
Yes.
that is Basecamp, as it were, and the
I think
value.
it's a thing. Yeah, I think it's a thing that we can really uniquely offer in a very authentic way, just because of who our customers are. And I love that they're able to meet and solve problems for each other and learn things from each other. So I think that's wonderful. I also think that as we go here, there's a lot of new connection points that we can build, right, with folks who we've been with for a long time, and who we can talk to a little better, a little more easily than we ever have been able to before.
I think it's also, you probably also, because I know you're doing some almost like cross promotional or kind of media type stuff, like featuring customers, and I guess it gives you the idea, it gives you an opportunity to kind of almost informally connect people and stuff as
Yes,
well.
very much so. In fact, we'd like to do a lot more of that. So we have, as I mentioned, a success team talking to new people every day. And not infrequently, they say, "Thanks so much for your help, Elaine. You don't seem to know much about, restaurants or whatever it is they are, right? Do you know anybody who is?" And now we have this platform to connect them to people who they have quite a lot in common with. So that
Nice.
is a great.
Excellent. It was great to see kind of that, and people should definitely kind of try and, well, join the secret squirrel club
Yeah.
as it currently
Well,
is.
we'll make it a little less secret over time.
Um, but the other thing I wanted to, so thank you for that. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about, and this is kind of almost like the core of kind of one of the things I wanted to ask you about because of Basecamp and its legacy and its heritage and kind of what it stands for and how it goes about its business, as it were, is because I know that I was, watching, the tectonic plates kind of like move kind of throughout the sort of the pandemic. And, this idea that, people talk about customer experience, employee experience, and it's just like you saw everything shift when everybody who could started
Mhm,
to work remotely. And then
mhm.
they're trying to figure out the kind of the balance. And the thing that it struck me about all of that is that the importance of, I guess, the experience of the leader or leadership experience, or like at any level, so whether it's team or supervisory, middle management, exec, whatever. And that sort of really showed up during the pandemic when people were forced to operate remotely, and it put us, so struck me that people were told to work remotely and then told to, well, look after your people, look after your customers, look after your suppliers. And then it
Mhm.
could have went, so who's looking after the people that are doing the looking after?
Mhm.
And that started
Mhm.
to really show up in the data. It's like there was all these assumptions that we have leadership management that are trained, appointed to, or trained in an environment which is, you operate in this type of environment, and then you're asked to be that same sort of person in a completely different operating environment with
Yeah.
under the assumption that you're equipped to do that, and that showed up with it created a lot of strain, I think, within management and supervisory team leadership kind of roles. And I'm circling back to my point the question I wanted to ask, because I know that kind of Basecamp are one of the pioneers of like remote work. You've been working remotely for like the longest time. I think you flirted with an office once
Yes,
briefly.
we had an office. We did have a Chicago office that we actually uh, don't have anymore. We gave that up a couple of years ago, actually, right before the pandemic. So
Yeah.
good time.
But I also know that Jason and DHH, I'm not going to say David's whole name, is Hanmeyer Hansen.
Very
Henmeyer
good.
Hansen. Henmeyer Hansen. Anyway, Jason and David wrote a book about it called, funnily enough, Remote Work. And I thought I'd ask you about, given that you joined the company, you haven't actually been in the company for so kind of like long, about a year.
Yeah, just over a year, actually.
There you go. Um, and I wanted to ask you about what sort of advice would you have for leaders, given kind of your experience, that will help them perform and help their teams perform and deliver greater service to their customers, as it were, because I just want to ask for the
Yeah.
advice, the perspective from people that are been at it for the longest time, and you wrote a book about it, and you're well known for it. And I'm going to shut up now and hand it over to you.
It is amazing. The book was published almost a decade ago.
I know.
Which is kind of crazy to think about. And yes, as you know, we've been a remote first company for a very, very long time. We're highly distributed across the US and internationally. And I think that, by the way, gives us a lot of unique strength and opportunity in who we have joined the company, and just frankly access to talent. And so first and foremost, I would really encourage companies, particularly small ones, if they're not remote already, and I think many are, but just to look at it, because the competitive advantage it gives you from a talent perspective is really meaningful. So, we have a lot of customer companies who are remote as well, or who came on during the pandemic. I think about this. I think about remote work in kind of two different ways. So one is the functional, right? You've got to have the tools, the setup, the technology, so on and so forth, to make the thing work. I think that's fairly well understood at this point. I think what is still a work in progress is the cultural element. So from the leadership on down, and this is, certainly Jason and David wrote the book, so we benefit from this. From the leadership on down, what do you truly believe in? And what kind of relationship do you have with people up and down the organization? And I think we still see a lot of the struggle today, and in a lot of the, employees want to be remote, and leadership teams want them back in the office. And why do some surveys say it's all peachy keen wonderful, and some surveys say productivity is down and everything's terrible? And I think it comes down to what's that relationship between the team and the leadership and the management. And my advice to management broadly is that I have found in the course of my career that people will impress you greatly with what they can do when you trust them. And they will also impress you differently with how little they can do when you show that you don't trust them. And so how do you build those relationships that, get everybody what they're actually looking for?
I think that's confessing, because it's a fundamental thing, right? A lot of it's about what you believe in, and with respect to, I guess, yourself and also other people. But actually, it starts with yourself.
Yes. I have wondered that, actually. This is very interesting. I have wondered if the executives who come out most strongly against remote work themselves find themselves to be unproductive other than in the office, and if that's really what it's a reflection of.
I mean, I think, I would prefer that probably is part of it, or it speaks to their own kind of neuroses and anxieties around what are you scared of?
Right. Yes, exactly. What are you scared of? Or what do you not fundamentally believe, and why? Right. And there's a lot of conversations about productivity paranoia, and employees who now need to keep some, we don't use this thing, so some green light green by jiggling the mouse or whatever it is. I mean, it's getting very destructive.
The kind of monitoring, surveillance.
Yeah, I mean, it's outrageous.
Well,
and I think any CEO would step back and say, really, is that what I want? That's the outcome I'm looking for from people all day. Keep the light green. Really?
I had a conversation with somebody about this, actually, because this all kind of, some of that sort of performance sort of stuff took off, and I think it was second wave of lockdown during the pandemic sort of thing. And I had a conversation with somebody that was sort of involved in that sort of space, and they were like going, well, inherently the monitoring software in itself is not a bad thing. It's how it's used is a bad thing. I'm a bit like, that's like the argument says guns don't kill people, robbers do. And I think, well, but then I thought about it a bit more, because I kind of my hackles kind of went up, and I was like, really? I'm not so sure. But then I thought about it, and I'm like, got a bit uncomfortable. And I thought about it and went, actually, there is truth in that, because there are domains where performance analytics, and monitoring is used to the strength of performance improvement. Like, take for example, sports, where you've got athletes that are wearing these kind of like vests and stuff, and it monitors movement and all these different sort of things. Now, the distinction I would make, because I see you pulling a face now, ladies and gentlemen, we are on video, even though it's an audio recording, so I can see Elaine pulling a face right now. As is the point with that, the difference is people understand kind of what it's there for and how it's there to help. And so it gets used because it's part of a conversation around performance improvement, and it's not done in a sort of like an overlord, draconian oversight type of thing. And so I think you have to be very careful about some of that sort of stuff. But then it comes that feeds completely back full circle back into that trust thing. It's like, do you trust people?
Yes.
Do you trust
Yes.
people? Have you hired the right people to do the right jobs? And do you trust them to be able to do that?
Exactly. And if you don't, then, there's something intrinsically flawed in your organizational setup. I mean, look, so I agree. It does come back to trust. I see the application in sports. I would argue the difference is in sports, those measurable outcomes are the goal, right? So if you have some kind of work scenario where it's understood that that's the goal and the employee is in for it, and that's what you're all set out to do, I guess that's one thing. I would say in the majority of other cases, you're measuring something that is not actually what you're looking for. And so it fundamentally, just having the software fundamentally breeds distrust. And it's fundamentally.
Because you end up with this kind of digital form of presenteeism, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So on the side, I do some doctoral research in motivation and in organizational behavior and management. And I will tell you, autonomy and skill variety and task identity. I mean, these are some of the well-proven for decades factors that go into internal motivation, and monitoring and micromanagement and so on. Absolutely or not.
Absolutely. The other thing about the leadership side of things that I wanted to ask about, because I know that and this is a thing that I've always kind of said, is I wish that it feels like as people get promoted, they get further and further away from the work that needs to get done, the customer interface, and you end up sort of almost like taking decisions by dashboard and spreadsheet and Chinese whispers in many ways. And I wish that more people would stay connected to the front line. And I know that you could have talked about this idea that you have an EOS initiative. Everyone support. Well, I thought when you said the EOS, it sounded like an old digital camera.
It does. I think I have one.
There you go. I think I might have one as well somewhere. I have to go check later. But it's like, how does because tell me about the EOS, Everyone on Support initiative, and how that keeps everybody connected, as it were, because I think it's a really missing thing, particularly as organizations scale, which is something that kind of like smaller businesses, they can't get away from it because they're smaller businesses. They're just sort of closer to it. And they're so ingrained with and knitted into the lives, the trials and tribulations of the lives of the customers, and helping solve their jobs to be done, as it were.
Yes. So, I mean, make no mistake, we have a team that is full-time dedicated to our customer support, and they do it the best. But to your exact point of keeping people connected, right? We have an EOS, Everyone on Support program, and we have everybody do a turn in the support queue a day or a couple of days, a couple of times a year. And I don't think that's really unique. I've seen it elsewhere. What's I think really unique is that literally, Adrian, everybody does it. Everybody does it. And I think I was, I don't know, maybe 3-4 months on the job when my turn came up. And I said, oh my gosh, seriously? This could do us more reputational damage than help. I mean, it's quite intimidating, right? All the number of things that you want to know and be up to speed on to really be in a live support queue. But our support team is fantastic, and they have this great way of setting it up so that there's a lot of help and a lot of guardrails around you. And it really helps you in the course of a day get up close and personal with the different kinds of customers who come in, with the different kinds of questions that come in. And there's a vibe to it, for lack of a better term, right? That you get from being that close to, quite frankly, live people who are using your product. And I would say by the end of the day, it's quite tiring, but there's also kind of an energy that feeds back to you because you can see firsthand the product of the work, if that makes sense. You can see first, oh, this is how we're actually making a difference in the world. This is how we're actually making a difference with small businesses. And it's very gratifying. And it obviously brings up a lot of challenges, which is good because then you really know what's on people's minds. But it really helps with the connectedness. And I love that we do it throughout the organization.
And does it help? I mean, because it seems to me that there's a two-way benefit to this, that not only the you as a leader, as a COO, would a couple times a year or however frequently you do it, you get smashed into the daily reality of your customers' kind of problems. It's like, but then I'm sure there's a colleague benefit in there as well, that you end up with the support team, fantastic as they are, you're showing up and going, I'm interested. And it kind of opens up those kind of channels and stuff that because it shows that you're interested and it's important and you understand the work that they do, because that's always been a bugbear of mine, is that many people don't necessarily really understand the depth and the breadth and the scope of the work that people that in service and support really kind of do. And actually, only when you really, really understand it, do you go, as you say, blimey, it's tiring. It's constant. But actually showing up from a colleague's perspective, I'm pretty sure they must get something out of that, because then they feel connected as well.
Yes, I think that's true. And I hope that's true. I think my observation is the same as yours across the organizations that I've been in. There's always a live support team. And that team, especially the bigger the organization gets, doesn't get all the credit it deserves. Really doesn't, right? Especially, here's the irony: the better they do it, the less credit they get, right? Because the more seamless it looks and the more like automatic and, oh, well, it's just these people in this, on the second floor or whatever who do the thing. And ironically, the less credit and respect that they get. So I hope, yes, from a leader perspective, I hope that's something that they see, is if I'm going to spend, some time out of my, my days and so on, doing it with them, that's because it's important. Quite frankly, it's also very humbling. Down as somebody who doesn't do this, our support people train for months before they are really fully understanding. I think actually it's probably more 6 months to a year, but so it's very humbling to sit there again in the live queue, watch things come at you, and know that there's a person with a real issue and you'd better not fail them.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. No, I love to hear kind of like stories like that, because it makes it kind of real. And it's like, there's a lot of people that talk about stuff, but there's a difference between talking about stuff and it's the right thing to do, and then actually putting it in place. So actually, thank you for sharing that and sort of giving it a name, EOS, which is kind of cool, because it actually makes it real and it shows that people are actually doing it, not just talking about it, but people like yourselves are actually doing it. And it's probably one of the reasons why you are as kind of well thought of a company and loved a company as you are. So thank you for doing that, because I think everybody wins when you do it. Elaine, that was a bit of a ramble around some of the stuff that you've been kind of doing. And but what I wanted to say was wanted actually some more general sort of like stuff. But I also, before I did that, wanted to say to you, is there anything that we've missed out that you want around Basecamp or Hey or 37 Signals, whatever that you want to throw about, that you think actually I should tell you about this as well, because this is a cool thing?
What has really struck me what has really struck me about the company and about the products that we build over the last year is just the breadth of situations in which we can be helpful. I mean, literally from marketing agencies to restaurants to churches to, we have some great customers at Colorado State University, so higher education. We met recently a guy who runs an old growth forest who uses Basecamp. I love.
He grows trees.
Well, I think he nurtures the trees that are, pre-existing, hence the old. But what I love is I think we have been taught to believe that the answer is ever more complex software solutions specific to a industry, business, et cetera, et cetera. And it just more and more complex, and then splice this off and have a specialized tool for this and a specialized tool for that. And what it has signaled to me is the fallacy of that. And that what makes that the simplicity and accessibility of the software is more important than the specificity of the use case. And what really is bridging the gap for us is the human interaction. And that I think this is what we started off talking about a lot of big tech and so on and so forth, and that we all have on our desktops. And what we're losing out on is the humanity, is the human interaction, right? You and I getting to discuss actually, right, what good customer experience looks like, as opposed to looking at what's the best codified playbook of how to scale X number of reps per 100 customers or whatever it is, right? Where did the human element go? Where did we lose touch with who we're actually helping and why? And that has been probably the best big picture message of the last year for me.
Awesome. And yes, here to that. And
people, Adrian, we care about people, dang it.
Well, of course, crumbs. I mean, here's the thing, is like people make stuff, people buy stuff. That's it, right? And artificial beings don't make stuff yet, and they don't buy stuff yet. So kind of we haven't been disaggregated out of that whole kind of like the whole system yet.
Yes.
So we're still at the beginning and the end of everything. And so, yeah, we have a say.
Yep, I agree.
So it's gonna. As I said, I wanted to ask you some kind of general kind of questions. I want to ask you kind of like this, maybe a slightly different question, because I've been asking people kind of like saying, the last couple of years have been quite challenging for people, having to change in working models and all these different sort of things. What have you learned and stuff? And then I was thinking about kind of Basecamp and the fact that you're fully remote and going like, the last couple of years must have felt kind of quite normal.
I don't know if anybody could say that, but okay.
I mean, I guess the challenges would be different, really, because it's not the challenge of actually working remotely or moving to a remote way of working, because that was already established. So I guess, what were the challenges for yourselves, and kind of what are the big things that you kind of learned over the last kind of couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, 37 Signals absolutely had the benefit of already being remote first, of already having the tools in place, largely already have the culture in place. I don't think that exempts us from the larger challenges, right? People are
So I was being a bit trite, obviously.
Yeah, no, I know. People are experiencing still experiencing in their own ways, the challenges of the collision between work and home. And, you've got kids out of school. I have a young child. I tell you firsthand, that wasn't a lot of fun. So, all these different kinds of things. But I think what it really underscored for me more than anything, it's funny. I'm going to date myself now, but a couple of decades ago, I was working in a very large company, and I was part of the strategic planning team. And so for months, we labored over this strategic plan, right? The end product of which was like this 3-inch thick binder that had all these plans in it of initiatives and things that we were going to do over the course of the next 3 years. We're very proud. We made many, many copies, distributed them to all the executives in the company. Everybody's very pleased. Well done, well done. And we stuck the thing on a shelf. And I would argue probably nobody took it off the shelf after that. And I've never made such a binder in any role, any company since. I think after the 3-year plan, for a couple of different places, I was part of authoring a 1-year plan. And even that has started to seem a little far-fetched. And certainly if you follow Jason and David, they believe in even less sort of long-range planning than that. And I think that is the thing that we have all are learning, I guess, to be more comfortable with is, look, all organizations need some level of coordination and so on. Got to know, kind of what's happening. Can't show up completely unprepared. But at the same time, these big plans where the one thing builds on the other thing, builds on the other thing, and now you've got all of these contingencies in place. I can't help but think in a lot of places, you're probably setting yourself up for failure. Like, how many steps would you have to go before you fell off that train? Do you play any pool, any billiards? Have you ever?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So I'm not great at this, but I played a little bit in college and so on. And there's always this notion of if you're playing billiards, you like do the shot and you leave the cue ball here, and that enables the next shot, and so on and so forth. You build this, long chain. And the better you are, the longer chain you build. But you've got to make that first shot first, or else the rest of it's useless. And I think of it very much in that way. We've been trained to build these long chains, and then how many do you get? How many do most of us get before the chain is broken, and then now the rest of your planning is shot?
Yeah. So. I mean, it reminds me of that kind of that saying is like the can't remember who it was. It's probably something from a military background where somebody says, plans are useless, but the act of planning is invaluable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's another one that says, which is like, no plan can survive contact with the enemy.
Well said. Well said.
And I guess that's equally appropriate sort of thing. Yes, you have to figure out what you want to do and how you want to operate, what you stand for, and all these different sort of things, and how people kind of work together and all those links and everything else. But you've got to respond.
That's right.
To an ever-changing environment. You understand roughly the route that you can take. I mean, I guess a modern sat nav would be a decent analogy for this, because actually it will replan its route based on new information that tells you that traffic is going to be on this road or that road, and then it goes, actually, we're going to avoid that, or as an accident, or we're going to go around this way or that way, and it's constantly updating and kind of in real time.
Yeah, I like that. The world is constantly updating in real time. That's right.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks. So, final thing. Before I get to some kind of quick fire things at the end. So, yes. Elaine, from your experience, if I asked you to kind of boil everything down, if I asked you to say, if somebody's saying, I notoriously could have a bit of a rummage around on these, and these kind of conversations, but I ask people to kind of boil it down, just to say, if I was to ask you what your best advice would be to someone who's listening in that wants to improve either the customer or their employee experience, or both, let's say, what would it be? It'd be Elaine says, do this. What would this be?
Hire good people and then trust them to do the thing.
Oh, there you go. You heard it here. Do the thing.
Do the thing.
Brilliant. So, on the quick fire ones, a couple of these punk questions I always ask at the end of these interviews, which is a follow up on the Punk CX and Punk XL books that I explained to you about about before we started the conversation. So the first question I've been asked, and I told you this is my longitudinal social research, given that you're doing doctoral research, I'm trying to keep up with you, sort of like kind of like in that sort of like, I don't know, research stakes. Don't think that's kind of anyway.
We're going to
stop talking. Anyway,
great. Yes.
What one or two words would you use to describe a punk approach to customer experience?
Yeah, so I have a few different choices. So can I give you a couple?
Yeah, of course. Let's go for an accumulator. Let's see how we can get.
So I like obvious. right?
Okay.
So, and I'll tell you why. So I think I think we all know actually in our heart of hearts, we know what good customer experience looks like. We've just got all these competing other um, priorities and directions and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. All right. But at the core of it, we actually do know. It's actually quite obvious what's the right move to make. So I think that's one.
Okay. And do you have an alternative? Did you
And
say?
my alternative is going to be for alternative, I'm going to use human, going back to our earlier conversation.
So if you give me a second, I am going to check if they're on the list.
Oh,
Adding
okay.
to the list. I'm going to do it in real time because we're updating
Right.
in real time, just like we said.
Okay.
Human's already there,
Uh-huh.
and obvious is already there.
Oh, okay. Can I do one more? Can I
Okay,
try one more? Right.
and that's it.
And that's it. And that's it. Bespoke.
She shoots, she scores. Brilliant. Bespoke.
That's funny because bespoke was the first one I came up with.
Well,
And then I
you got to
thought,
trust your
oh,
gut.
that's probably right there. All
Got to
right.
trust your gut. Second question is what I talked about this thing called experience leadership, XL as I call it. It's kind of what company or brand do you think is an experienced kind of leader and why?
I mean, I think there's some well-known consumer retailers who I think there's some well-known consumer retailers who do a nice job on sort of the response side, right? An unhappy customer, I want to return this thing, and they do so. I think those are fine. I also think that should be pretty much table stakes at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think there are great ones at scale, and maybe this is a bias of where my mind is at these days with small businesses. So I have a friend who goes to the same sandwich shop for lunch every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And every single day, the ladies who work at the sandwich counter see him, know what he's going to order, but say it just in case he's, going to have something different. Knows that he likes pickles and the whole bit, and start making it before he's actually even gotten to the place in line.
Mm-hmm.
And they know him and they acknowledge him and so on and so forth. And so it's a lovely experience of, being known and being greeted and so on and so forth. What I think is so interesting about this is that not just that they do it, but they are happy to do it because they like that connection. And I think so many times in commercial transactions today, we're afraid to make a connection with a person. We're afraid to acknowledge, right? How many people do you know when you go out to a restaurant? Do they actually address the server by name? Right. But their name.
We have a restaurant just down there. It's a tiny little place. And we've sort of been, because we've just moved to Edinburgh in the last few months. And literally down the road, there's this tiny little kind of like local kind of restaurant. And we've sort of been adopted by the owner. It's called James. And it's just like, and I was like, oh, you should come to this and come to this and come to this. And it's just like,
right.
Yeah, it's just like super cool. It doesn't feel like you're in that sort of transactional thing.
And isn't it wonderful? And when did we decide as a society that we would rather be depersonalized?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we did.
No, indeed. Awesome. So, what was the name of that sandwich shop?
Oh, it's a small shop here in the U.S. I don't even think they have more than one location.
Okay, well, actually, legendary sandwich shops. Sandwich shops around the world is what I'm.
That's right. I think I'm sure there is one in every city, state, province, so on, town.
And so, final thing I wanted to ask is that I think we can all agree we thought the pandemic was bad, but the world's still weird, and there's all sorts of stuff kind of going on, and we thought things were going to kind of stabilized. But it's like, I don't know, find myself doom scrolling kind of like every morning going, no, look for the kind of the decent stuff to find. So I've been asking people recently at the end of these podcasts to please share with me kind of a good news story, something that you've seen over the last week that's kind of like interesting, exciting, made you smile, whatever, so we can end on a happy note.
It could be anything.
Anything.
I have a good one. Okay. So similar to you, too much doom scrolling going on. It's terrible. But I came across I think it was the Sunday New York Times last week, a really wonderful story about climate change that actually said that because of the confluence of global cooperation and policy change and so on and so forth, that the current projections say we have cut expected global warming by half in the last 5 years. And there actually is, mind you, still a long way to go, right? But there actually is light and promise that if we continue on this path, there will be a world for generations beyond us, which I thought after so many years of, the ice caps are melting, and we've seen so much freakish weather lately, and it just looks worse and worse. There actually is progress to report.
I will take that. That's fantastic.
I love it.
So we can drop the mic on that, finish on that kind of note. That's brilliant. All I'm going to say is that was the news from Elaine Richards, kind of calling in from, from 37 kind of signals, who produce kind of Basecamp and Hey. And I just want to say that was awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And what a great note to end on. So thank you for spending some time with me today. That's been ace.
Yes, it's been very fun. Thank you for having me.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.